Port Phillip City Council Planning Committee. The City of Port Phillip respectfully acknowledges the Yallock Willam clan of the Boonwurrung and traditional owners of other lands we meet from today. We pay our respects to their elders, both past and present. We acknowledge and uphold their continuing relationship to this land. Tonight's meeting is being held via the Webex platform and streamed via Council's webcast page. Whilst we have planned for this online meeting, there always remains the risk of technical issues, almost certain, arising from that are beyond our control. If we experience technical difficulties tonight, we will adjourn the meeting for a short time to resolve the issue. If the issue cannot be resolved and the meeting cannot continue, then we will adjourn till tomorrow evening and details will be circulated to the public as early as possible. Meeting processes have been altered by a resolution of Council to hear all submissions from members of the public at the start of the meeting. Additionally, voting on all motions will be under division, where the Chair will call upon councillors individually in rotating alphabetical order to state their vote. Apologies. Councillors, do we have any apologies? I don't believe so, because everyone's here. Agenda item 2, minutes of previous meetings. Councillors, the minutes of the Planning Committee held on 24 June 2020 have been circulated. Are there any questions regarding these minutes? If not, then can I have a motion via the chat function regarding these minutes? So moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Simic. Sorry, I missed the Mayor in that one, so sorry about that, Councillor Voss. It's moved Councillor Gross, seconded Councillor Simic. I will now put the motion under division and call for each councillor for your vote. Councillor Baxter.
4.
Councillor Bond.
4.
Councillor Brand.
4.
Councillor Copsey.
4.
Councillor Crawford.
4.
Councillor Gross. 4. Councillor Pearl.
In favour.
Councillor Simic.
4.
Councillor Voss.
4.
The motion is carried. Agenda item 3, declarations of conflict of interest. Does anyone have a conflict of interest in a matter being discussed at tonight's meeting?
Yeah, hi Chair. Councillor Marcus Pearl here. I have a conflict of interest in item 6.1, statutory planning delegation decisions. It's a direct conflict of interest as I got my fence painted and a permit is contained in that report. Fence constructed, I should say.
Great. I'm going to adjourn that item till the end, and so when you leave the meeting, you won't have to return.
Thanks very much.
Agenda item 4, public question time and submissions. We will now hear all public questions and comments on report items from members of the public. All requests to speak were required to be submitted by 4 p.m. this afternoon. At the time of registering to speak, submitters were given the option to join the Webex meeting virtually and ask their questions live during the meeting or have an officer read their statement on their behalf. Now, I've only been told that we've got one submission, and I call upon Claire Zimchik, speaking to item 6.5, C181 Port 271 to 281 Ingles Street, Port Melbourne. Okay.
Yes, thank you. Can everyone hear me?
As clear as a ding dong.
Great, that's what I like to hear. So my name's Claire Shimchick, as you introduced. Thank you. I'm an Associate Director at Urbis and would like to speak on behalf of the applicant in support of the project at 277 Ingles Street. First, would like to thank the council officers for their thorough assessment and recommendation of support for this important project. We've been working on obtaining approval for the redevelopment of this site since the lodgement of the first planning application back in 2014. And this project, like many others in Fisherman's Bend, including others you're going to hear tonight, has endured the changing, and I think we'll all agree, the challenging planning environment since then. Over the last 2 years, we've worked closely with authorities to revise the project and bring it into line with the government's recast vision for Fisherman's Bend. So the project before you tonight represents a compliant development in line with relevant planning policy. Given the significant size of the site and scale of the development, approval is sought for a master plan to be delivered in stages. The master plan demonstrates that the project will deliver key physical and social infrastructure that will enhance the precinct. This includes a new road located centrally through the site and also a network of laneways and open space for the community to enjoy. The mix of uses, which includes a hotel, retail space, residential, including a provision of affordable housing and office space, will contribute to a vibrant precinct. It also includes a significant supply of employment-generating floor space that will support the transition of the Sandry precinct from its industrial past into an active mixed-use area in line with the precinct vision, which is to become one of Melbourne's premium commercial locations. The proposed master plan, we feel, demonstrates high-quality design and visually interesting built forms. Detailed development plans will be provided for endorsement prior to the commencement of each stage of development, ensuring the detailed design and technical issues for each stage are thoroughly considered at the appropriate time. So we're really excited to see this project come to fruition and appreciate council support with this. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Ms. Simchi. So that's the only public question time or submission we have tonight. So I'll move on to agenda item 5, which is councillor question time. Councillors, do you have any questions? Thanks very much. I'll move on to now agenda item 6, which is petitions and joint letters. Councillors, we have no petition on tonight's agenda. 7, the main guts of the evening, is a presentation of reports. And we'll start off with 6.2 C175 Port 2 to 14 Thistlethwaite Street, South Melbourne. Now, are there any questions of officers in relation to this report? I should note that councillors have had the opportunity to ask questions earlier on today. So are there any questions? Councillor Voss.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask about the proposed wind mitigation measures for this particular site, and just wondering if Ms. Stewart could outline what they might be.
Through you, the Chair, thank you for your question. At the top of the podium level, which is a level 4 floor plan, there are a series of impermeable screens which are generally located to the corner of the tower component. Those screens are set to a height of 3 metres. Council's urban designers and landscape architects asked these features be treated with landscaping in order to help absorb them into the general presentation of the building. This is notable given the extent of vegetation and landscaping that is proposed on the top of that podium level.
Any further questions?
I'm just wondering if I could ask a follow-up, please, Chair. Will they work? Will these wind mitigation measures work?
Through you, Chair, thank you for your question. In respect of the measures that have been proposed, there has been an assessment which is supplemented the application material. Council officers have raised some concerns about the joint report. We have asked for more detail. Providing that detail generally responds to the requirements of the policy. We believe that these measures could respond to the to provide a suitable wind environment in this area.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any further questions?
Yes, I've got one up there.
Oh, David Brand, yes. Councillor Brand.
Yes, I'd just like to ask the officers, this morning I just was raised the issue of there's no apparent structure in this building proposal at the moment, and when it does get eventually worked up and sorted out, if it can coordinate with the represented structure on the facade, so that it actually comes together. And I don't know whether really my question is, do we need to put in a note now, or is that something which is just easily accommodated within the recommended motion as it stands? Does it need any further attention than that or not?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can answer that. It's George Borg here. Thank you for the question, Councillor Brand. No, I don't believe we need to at this point. I believe the plans will be altered at different times through the process as well. So we'll have an opportunity to require appropriate conditions when the final plans are in. We're pretty confident this is where they're close to, but there will be some tweaks along the way. We're confident of that, and we will certainly make sure that the as-built development will look like what the plans show.
No, they have to do better than that, because the plans don't show any structure at all.
This is question time only, unfortunately, yes. Councillor Brand.
Yes, fair enough. I'll leave it at that, though. Just as long as we don't need to do anything right now.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we would require that it is buildable, constructible, and ensure that it's done appropriately.
Thanks very much. So my sheet discloses no further questions. So, councillors, we have an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something different? Oh, sorry, we've got a question from the Mayor. Is that correct, Madam Mayor?
That is correct. Sorry, not looking at the chat there, Chair. I wasn't,
but it wasn't when I mentioned it. Anyway, keep on.
I just wanted to ask, this building is higher than the preferred or the maximum preferred building height for the area, being 12 stories. What additional sort of things has this building given to the community to earn the approval status?
Through you, the Chair. Thank you for your question, Mayor. So this site is located within the core area of the Montague precinct. It is an area where we encourage commercial development of this nature. This development is providing over 6,000 square metres of commercial office space, and it's also providing 550 square metres of retail space. This development is capable, subject to the incorporation of conditions regarding the landscape management. It is capable of providing quite a good landscaping response to the area as well.
Thanks very much. I see no further questions. Okay. Let's now move to resolutions. We have an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something different? So I have a mover of Councillor Crawford and seconded by Councillor Brand. Councillor Crawford, would you like to speak to the motion?
No.
Councillor Brown, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I would. Just to note a couple of things. One is I think it's really good to see a commercial building proposed confidently in the middle of the tsunami of residential towers on podiums through the whole of Fisherman's Bend. Fisherman's Bend was originally conceived, I think, over-optimistically by the minister back in 2013 as a mixed-use place, even though that's what he called it. It was the planning, or the lack of planning scheme that was imposed on the place meant that it was going to almost entirely become a residential forest, a residential tower. So it's really good to see something which actually strongly, confidently commits to having a commercial mix and actually work and production happening in this area as well as just living. So that's really good. I think it's a handsome building. It's I feel a little sorry for almost every single site in Montague, because I think it's got a grain size that would be better dealt with at a smaller level. But this, given that they're going to be towers, I think this one has a sort of a scale to it which looks like it's going to fit the place well. And I think it's really nicely put together and nicely proportioned. My only concern, which I just want to put on the record, is that the external elevation of it shows sort of brick piers. It looks like a sort of a building raised on slender brick piers with glazed in between. But when you look at it at the moment, there's no depth to it, so it's just brick wallpaper at the moment. I hope that when the structure is worked out in this building, that the two-dimensional brick piers will eventually appear as three-dimensional brick piers and make the building a convincing piece of architecture, which it deserves to be, and it looks like it could be, rather than a paper-thin piece of fake architecture. So that's the challenge there. But it promises, if it's built the way it's designed to look, it'll be a really nice piece of architecture for this part of the city. So thank you.
Mayor Voss?
Thank you, Chair. I am happy to support this Thistlethwaite development. So this is what I call Montague proper, if you like, right near the South Melbourne Primary School. It's very close to Kirrip Park, and in just going down there yesterday, for example, it is all happening down there in terms of development. There is development going on everywhere. It certainly is a happening place. There are a number of concerns that I had with this, and I think the officers have picked up most of these things in the detail of the report. For example, some of the external appearances being things stored on the street. I think this is getting to be quite a habit, and I'm pleased to see that that is a condition. It's very pleasing to see an application for commercial office and retail building. The site has a maximum building height, a preferred maximum building height of 43 metres, being 12 stories. This building, it will be 16 stories, and so that will actually exceed the maximum height. But considering what's around it, the preferred precinct character, and the street wall heights, I am quite comfortable with supporting this application, and I'm very pleased to see that the podium has been reduced to 4 from 6 levels. There are a few concerns, obviously still flooding. I mentioned the wind earlier, and certainly the flooding issues with the car stackers and pits associated with being below the ground level there, but overall very happy to support. So thank you very much to the officers for turning around this very quick and detailed report.
There's no other speakers, but I might say something. I'm always very squeamish about going beyond recommended height levels. The sensitive areas around Thistlethwaite Street include Kirra Park and across a very wide road, and then towards the other end of Thistlethwaite Street is, of course, Port Melbourne, which residential, which is a very sensitive area. I think there's nothing more annoying than a councillor from another ward pontificating on these issues. I sort of, as I speak, I don't know which way I'm going to go, but I do have this issue about height deep in my soul, so it's troubling me. But I'll think about it and I'll vote vote in the next 10 seconds. So, Councillor Crawford, do you wish to close?
No.
So I'll put the motion under division and call upon each councillor to vote. Councillor Brand.
4.
Councillor Copsey.
4.
Councillor Crawford.
4.
Councillor Gross. 4. Councillor Pearl.
Against.
Councillor Simic.
4.
Councillor Voss.
4.
Councillor Baxter.
4.
Councillor Bond.
4.
I declare the motion is carried. Thanks very much. Now, if we could move on to agenda report number 6.3, 272 to 280 Normanby Road, South Melbourne. Are there any questions of the officers in relation to this report?
Yes.
I see one here from Councillor David Brand.
Yes, I want to make a query of the officers. The recommendation, which I haven't got in front of me at the moment, basically says recommend approval with the addition of conditions derived from the discussion in section 9 and section 11 of the report. Section 9, I think, being internal or other referrals, and 11 being the officer's assessment of those referrals. I think in the printed report that there are some errors in that column.
And your question is, Councillor Brand?
I'm wondering how what are we voting on in terms of the conditions that we recommend to be transmitted to the next stage by the officers? Are they going to be topic headings, or are they actually going to be literally what is printed in the in the section 11 of the report?
So, Mr. Ball, did you get that?
Can I perhaps answer that one? This is Simon Goodrich. Through you, Mr. Chair. The process from here is that there isn't a draft incorporated document that's been submitted by the applicants. It is a bit embryonic at the moment. The pattern is that the Department of Phillip will complete that draft and submit it to all parties for comment. We will have an opportunity to provide our draft conditions in response to that.
Can you just clarify that for what that means for my question?
It means, Councillor, that we will submit conditions which will pick up on the concerns that have been raised in the officer report, and we will put those to the Minister and the other parties.
Okay, and so what are the councillors voting on specifically if they follow the recommendation of the officers?
There's a series of concerns that have been set out in section 9 of the report, which is the internal referral responses, and then there is an office for assessment of matters at section 11 of the report. That assessment includes the fors and against of the report, and at various points throughout that assessment, there are notes that matters would need a condition to resolve a council concern.
Yes. So, if one disagreed with some of the commentary, it doesn't mean that I should vote against it, because there's also commentary which is it's for and against commentary rather than a particular position commentary.
And the question is?
Well, I'm just trying to clarify what we would be, how it is appropriate to construe our vote on it, I'm just trying to understand what we're committing to if we vote for it or against it, for that matter.
The officer recommendation is to support the application subject to conditions to address concerns throughout the report.
Okay, that's not.
I'm going to draw a line under this conversation. I think that's been asked and answered 3 times. Councillor Voss?
Understood once.
Well, once is better than me. Councillor Voss?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to ask the question, can you please confirm then, under item 11, officers' assessment, you have, whether it's achieved or not, you have a recommended and then a proposed, and it's the proposed that is the officer's actual recommendation. I'm just wondering if you can please outline then the proposed recommendation from the officers around affordable and social housing.
Sorry, Patricia, you go.
No, I'm happy for you to speak, Mr. Borg.
Through you, Madam Chair, and apologies, I got frozen out of my system previously. On this one, and I'm struggling to find the location, but I can go by memories that the initial offer that was provided to council as part of this proposal was 4% of affordable housing that was supposed to be provided as part of the development. Officers have considered the proposal as has been put and the offer, and we've asked for 6% of affordable housing. Now, the reason we have done that is to be consistent with the policy. The issue around social housing is one of those matters that the Standing Advisory Task Force is not considering. So the Minister, in his correspondence to us, has indicated to us he is unclear whether he's going to take the matter to the advisory committee or make the decision himself through another process. So we're saying that's okay, you don't need to do that, but we'll be asking for 6% affordable housing as part of this development.
Thank you, Mr. Borg. Can I ask a follow-up, please, Chair?
Sure.
So just on the information, so I understand, for example, social housing in section 11 is really clear. I think what the requirement is, and then what the proposed is to add the additional to go to 6%, 17 dwellings. But under the affordable housing item, just one item above, or 2 items above, it doesn't actually say to go to 17 dwellings. So in that part of it. So it's just a little bit. I'm sort of hearing what Councillor Brand was saying, and I think there is probably a little bit of.
No, through you, Mr. Chair, if I could clarify. So at 11:14, we on page 53 of the report, We identify the policy provisions. We talk through that process, then we go into the assessment. We have provided what the applicants indicated in that and the value of the 4% of the dwellings that's been provided to us. And we've then gone back to the terms of reference and discussed those, that indicating that the dwelling uplift and social housing provisions do not apply because of the terms of reference, as I've previously described. We've also referred the matter to Council's housing officer, who was also very appreciative of the 4% offer, but suggested because of this, and they are getting an uplift, so we can't pretend there isn't one, we're asking for an extra 5 dwellings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I take it from the form guide there's no further questions. Councillors, we have an officer's recommendation. Would somebody like to move this or something different? This is moved, Councillor. Oh, are you asking a question, Councillor Brand?
I did want to ask a question. I just wanted to get a distinction.
You're testing my incredible indulgence.
Well, yes, I was trying to look at the report to see what the question needed to be at the same time as. Anyway, can't chew gum and walk at the same time. I just wanted to get a distinction between affordable housing and social housing on this, because it offers 12 units of social housing, and I'm not quite sure what the relationship with affordable housing is in these terms that we're looking at the moment. I'm sorry, could we just have that clarified?
Could I ask Mr. Guttridge to answer that? Otherwise, I can.
Yeah. For you, Mr. Chair. Affordable housing, I'll try and make this simple, councillors.
No, don't bother.
Affordable housing is the umbrella term for the legislation, which includes social housing. In the planning scheme for Fisherman's Bend, they have separated the two, and the policy is that there be 6% of affordable housing provided for all new developments. There's another section of the planning scheme which says that if someone wants to build more or a tall building with more dwellings than what is designated under the dwelling density provisions of the planning scheme, they can do so if they provide one social housing dwelling for every 8 additional dwellings that they construct. And the method of delivering those social housing dwellings is to gift them at 100% cost to the developer to a registered housing association. This council has also always taken the view that for affordable housing, gifting to a housing association is also the most desirable means of providing that housing. There is, however, different views with regard to affordable housing, that it may be achieved through provision of 6% housing, 6% of all dwellings, but with various discounts that may be less than 100%, or with various lease agreements and so forth. And that's this issue that we keep debating in council. So on top of all that, councillors, all these applications we're considering at the moment as planning scheme amendments, there are terms of reference that have been prepared by the department, and under those terms of reference, the dwelling density provisions and the social housing uplift provisions that's associated with that are turned off. We don't actually have a formal affordable house, social housing requirement for these amendments. Having said that, so that means we can't ask for social housing. We certainly can ask for 6% affordable housing, but we can't ask for social housing. But a developer may offer social housing, that is housing gifted 100% to in perpetuity, to satisfy the affordable housing provision. but in doing so, we don't really calculate it against the dwelling uplift provision. We consider it as an alternative means of affordable housing. I hope that makes it clear, councillors.
I've actually understood something better, so that's a very good job. Can I just ask one more question? If the uplift provisions were applied, and I understand that they're not, but they might be considered as an idea, as a model. If they were applied to this, how much of the uplift, how much of the social housing they have offered, the 12 units, would have resulted from in that uplift, and how much of it is beyond what they're getting on the uplift? If it was calculated out.
If I could possibly defer to Ms. Stewart to answer that question, I think she might have the maths in front of her.
Yes. Through you, the chair. Thank you for your question. So for the social housing component, that would result in 23 social housing dwellings for the uplift.
Right. So that puts the.
The question is.
I will make a statement about it then later on. Thank you for the answer.
Good idea. Okay, councillors, I can't see any more questions on the ticker. So we've had it moved by the Mayor. Is there a seconder? I'll second it. Oh, no, here we go. Councillor Brand.
Good.
So it's been moved by the Mayor and seconded by Councillor Brand. Mayor, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks very much, Chair. I would. I'm very supportive of this building. Just to give context, it is in the Montague Core area with a frontage to Normanby Road. Also has a frontage to Johnson Street and Munro Street. So quite an unusual block in that it's got 3 frontages, and it's right opposite a building that we approved last year, and there's a number of buildings around it that have been approved. This development has quite a number of good community benefit points about it. So, and I think it's to be commended for that. It demonstrates largely what we want to see in the future for Fisherman's Bend. For example, it contributes to the realisation of the Johnson Street Park, going forward, and I think that is a good point to note. It also, as we expect, contributes to affordable housing, and I fully support the officer's recommendation, and as I know this council would want to see, the maximum being 6% of dwellings for affordable housing, an additional 17. Also, the social housing being more than what they've offered, and we want or consider 6% being a minimum, and that's also an additional 17 dwellings. So, and that they get that because they've got an uplift higher than the preferred level in the area. But having some consideration being given to the height, it makes sense in the context of that particular location, because on either side of that building there are higher buildings, so it does make sense that that could get a little bit more height for the benefit that is being given. So yes, there's a number of benefits that are being given for the extra height that they've got. I think the building is quite attractive. I do like the orange piece of it that does look a little like a crane, but I do think it'll actually be quite an attractive feature, and the slimness of the building I do believe will be something to talk about in the future. So just want to again thank the applicant really for these community facilities that are being put into this particular building. As I mentioned, this is really what we want to see in Fisherman's Bend going forward. So thank you.
Councillor Brand?
Yes, I just want to make a few comments on it as well. I agree with Councillor Voss's outline of the social benefits, and especially its relationship with the park. And I just want to comment on the, and also, of course, on the social housing and affordable housing. I think we should be asking the most that we can and being generous. I mean, grateful for getting as much as we do. But it should be a beautiful relationship there. But it's very, very important to pursue that to as far as we possibly can for the overall good of the community and the the eventual community and society of Fisherman's Bend. But on the triangularity of the site, it presents incredible opportunities and incredible limitations as well. The opportunity is there for a spectacular building to have such a sharp triangle there with a leading edge. You can see that the intent of the architects is to make that something which is like a really massive piece of urban sculpture in an interesting way, like a sort of an industrial scale sort of zipper or saw blade or something. It's going to be really quite something, and these architects that can handle urban sculpture on a massive scale brilliantly. I think the architecture itself at the moment looks a little bit placeholder in general, but the moves with that sort of that zipper edge, with the crane-like thing on the side, with bits and pieces like that, I think it's going to turn into, as well as being a robust and really good-looking apartment building and mixed-use building, it's also going to be a great piece of urban sculpture. Probably no need for any further urban art on it, because it will be urban art in its own right under the handling of these architects. But I think the architecture needs a little bit more development, but the signs are there for something absolutely tremendous in a very central location. It's going to be spectacular. It's going to be memorable, and I think it'll make people feel, sort of fondly for the urban jungle in this sort of in this industrial setting. I think it's going to have something to say about that, some resonance with it. Being a triangular site also, it is very, very hard to fit stuff into a pointy triangle. And I know there's a lot of commentary about being dissatisfied with the lack of sleeving of the car parking and lack of various things that are problematic in the podium. And it's just I just think that if we can get these benefits of expression and art and contextuality in the building itself, we might forgive a little bit on what can't be packed into that podium with that incredibly narrow end to it. Let's make the most of the triangularity, and let's not let it demand too. Let's make the demands proportionate to the problem of fitting anything into that and making it work. So far, it looks like it's going to be good. Thank you.
Yeah, well explained, Councillor Brand. I even know you overused my least favourite word, triangularity. There's no other speakers, so Mayor Voss, do you wish to close? That's a no. Okay, I'll now put the motion under division and call upon each councillor's vote. Councillor Copsey.
For.
Councillor Crawford.
For.
Councillor Gross. For. Councillor Pearl.
Favour.
Councillor Simic.
For.
Councillor Voss.
For.
Councillor Baxter.
For.
Councillor Bondi.
For.
Councillor Brand.
For. That
motion is carried unanimously, according to my vote. So thanks very much, everyone. Now move to 6.4, C183 Port, 17 Rocklea Drive, Port Melbourne. Are there any questions of the officers in relation to this report, councillors? Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Councillor Gross. I guess I wanted to clarify, given the positioning of this particular block, is there extra soundproofing that will go on across the building, or is that something that we're conditioning as part of the approval?
Good question. Officers?
Thank you for your question. For you, Mr. Chair. This site immediately abuts the freeway. It's in a mixed-use area where there are legacy industries, which will remain for some time. And from the strategic framework plan point of view, there is a possibility of there being a elevated freight railway line and possible freight road running along the immediate rear of this site between it and the actual current freeway reservation. So there's a potential for some noise at present and increased noise in the future. Officers strongly recommend that this building incorporate throughout its entire construction a very high level of noise attenuation, and that in fact some redesign be undertaken to take away some of the dwellings that face the freeway and possible freight route, and instead substitute other uses that would be possibly less adversely affected, such as offices and commercial uses.
Thanks very much. Are there any further questions? I can't see any. So, councillors, we have...
Sorry, I'm just struggling to press my buttons.
That's okay, Councillor Brand. Your question is?
Just on that same issue, with the freeway and the industrial, for the freight routes through there, is there any guidance in any of the planning provisions for Fisherman's Bend for how residential development should respond to the noise hazard, the noise source of the freeway running straight through the middle of it, and of course the future possible elevated freight train route?
For you, Mr. Chair, yes, there is, councillors. There is what's called a planning practice note, which has been issued by the state government, which deals with noise levels for properties within certain distances of major noise sources, and there is particular classifications for roads carrying over, I think it's 10,000 vehicles per day from memory, and railway lines. This would fall into both of those categories, and following a practice note, which also is echoed in the Core 58 apartment standards, would ensure that highest level of noise attenuation through the construction of the building.
And just on the same topic, there's been proposals, I don't know whether it's the same proposal being reapplied for in an amended form or previous proposals on this site that have been debated on the measures to deal with the noise at the back of the property. Have those issues been resolved in this plan, or are they being repeated in this proposal?
Excuse me, councillors. Mr. Chair, since this application was previously considered by council, those new noise measures and planning practice note that I referred to have come into play. They were not in existence when this matter was previously considered. Further, there's been a review of the Fisherman's Bend framework and the strategic ambitions for the framework for the precinct. They have affirmed this area as a mixed-use area. That doesn't necessarily mean that every use is suitable for every site. You do have to take into consideration every site particular context. we, as officers, have had regard to what the applicants' acoustic consultants had to say, and their thoughts were that they advocated for a lesser standard and for only those dwellings actually abutting the freeway to have a high level of noise attenuation. And we say that no, that's not enough, that the whole building would be possibly impacted by direct and indirect ambient noise, and therefore the whole building needs to be protected. And as we said, consideration be given to taking residences away from that harsher north and west interface and replacing it with commercial uses that have the potential to be less adversely impacted.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Voss.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I'd just like to ask about the height. Again, this particular building is exceeding the maximum preferred height of 30 metres, being 8 stories. Just wondering if you could talk me through why you are comfortable with that height being exceeded.
Brilliant.
Good question.
Pardon me. Brilliant, Mr. Chair. The reasons that we have resolved to support the heights as proposed, and a couple of reasons. Firstly, this is in a broader precinct which advocates for mid-rise heights, which is heights between 7 and 15 levels. And then there's a refinement on that which does advocate a preferred building height of 8 stories or 30 metres. Those preferred prefixes mean that consideration can be given to buildings that are taller. It's not an area where there's a mandatory height limit, but these are the guidances. When we look at the building itself, what we have is an application for 10 and 13 levels, but the 10th and 13th level on both buildings are only small rooms associated with really getting access and resident lounges and the like onto the rooftop open space areas of both of the towers. And in general views, those small elements would not be visible. The building would read substantially as a 9 and 12-storey building as such. If we then step back from that, the 9-storey building is only an increase of 1 over the preferred level of 8, so it is a relatively minor variation. And the 12 stories is then set back on the site and, in fact, masked to some extent by the lower part of the tower, so it would not be particularly prominent in itself. And lastly, the building is at the very far end of this precinct, and so for its influence on the character of the area would be diminished by its remote location within the precinct.
Thanks very much. I can see no further questions. So,
sorry, Dick, I did have a, sorry, Chair, I did have one further question that I...
Sure.
Thank you. Just around the requirement in the Fisherman's Bend framework for Wirraway to have 30% 3-bedroom apartments. I note in this application that it falls well short of that 30%. However, there is an option to join some of the bedrooms together, some of the apartments together, should the market demand that. I'm just wondering, why will we let this go through, given that is something that's quite firm or recommended in the framework, but the applicant feels they can't sell 3-bedroom apartments?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we are seeing throughout Fisherman's Bend varying responses to this requirement for a number of larger bedrooms, dwellings for families and the like. and we're seeing with that varying levels of compliance with that. There are obviously changes in market condition for various reasons. We're going through a unprecedented change at the moment with COVID-19, for example. We believe that at least establishing a baseline within these buildings is appropriate, and if the building designs can be incorporate that adaptability, then that is still a good outcome, a good planning outcome, and provides sufficient flexibility to give peace of mind to for the support of this application. We are seeing instances of where in the market where we've approved buildings with one and two bedrooms, and people then do buy into those buildings and want to adapt. So we get subsequent planning permit applications down the track for alterations to the building. In this instance, where the plans are already featuring that design element, then again, it just supports that flexibility in the process.
Okay, I sense that's the last question, so let's move on to the officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something different? Councillor Voss is moving, and I will second. Oh no, Councillor Crawford has second. Thanks very much, Councillor Crawford. Councillor Voss.
Thank you, Chair. There's a lot to say about this particular building, but first up, it's in the Wirraway section of the Fisherman's Bend area, in the non-core area. It is on a corner block, close to the freeway, as we've heard, and there are a number of sort of mitigating factors around that, being the freight channel, the wind, and of course the height, which has been discussed here. I agree with the discussion and the officer's recommendation around the requirement for noise attenuation, and as a result some redesign to substitute for some commercial uses that are not so sensitive and won't be so impacted by, in particular, the overnight noise. The vision for Fisherman's Bend for Wirraway area is a family-friendly area, as much as there's some other things as well, and that's why it's really quite important that to deliver on that we have accommodation that caters for families. In this particular case, I think we're being quite flexible in allowing either way. So if the market says, well, the families don't want to live there, so there is accommodation that suits that, and if so, and if families do want to live there, then of course they can join those apartments together. On the height, it does exceed the preferred, but I understand the argument that at 10 and 13 is not much further higher. But I also want to thank the applicant for their offer of affordable housing, being the 6%, the equivalent of 9 dwellings. And I support the officer's recommendation there that rather than the 20 years as offered, it is at least 30 years. Or rather in perpetuity, but 30 years is certainly something that I think we need to take, and it's really that reason for that affordable housing that I'm really agreeing to the height increase. So, yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Crawford.
I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you. We have no other speakers.
Yes.
Wow. He's come from the back, unannounced.
Yes. Well, I've announced myself now. I think
with a kiss.
That was especially for you. Yes, I just pressed the wrong button, but nevertheless, it was an accident.
I'm taking it as deliberate.
Okay, good. Yes, I agree with so much of what's in the officer's report here. I don't think it's a non-compliant building, but I think it's just got a lot of things that could be rethought and improved. I agree thoroughly that that back corner facing onto the potential elevated freight corridor and the freeway that's already there, it would be a not incredibly good place to live, but it could be a really great place for sort of semi-industrial, semi-commercial, like, design studios or workshops, places where a bit of noise is not going to make it difficult, but it can actually be part of the scene. And it would, if you took the end of that sort of end of the building and gave it over to some commercial sort of small scale industrial creative industry sort of use, it would improve the building so much, it would improve the office so much, it would improve that part of town so much. There are opportunities like that in here, which I think are implicit in the recommendations from the officers, that it would be it would end up as just a better product and a better fulfillment of the vision for Fisherman's Bend. Same with the apartments along the front. I mean, having a little gateway to a one-story apartment is nothing special. If all the ones along Rocklea Avenue, whatever it's called, Drive, if they were like two-story townhouses, you would have, again, a sort of a varied sort of sub-typology in the thing, that there'd be another variation within the building of living conditions and types, and so a variation within the city. It would be more expressive of variety. It'd be it'd just be better in so many ways. I don't know why we wouldn't do that. Even the recommendation to take the bedrooms out of that front bit over the main entrance, whereas that I think incredibly ugly splayed sheet of glass that goes up above the main entrance, full of bedrooms. And therefore full of blinds, which will be pulled the whole time because of the privacy problems of the bedroom. It would be just so much better if it was lived in, occupied in a different way. I wish the building was more contextual. It actually had more sort of sense of it being in an industrial area rather than a sort of a blingy piece of sort of random jewellery. There's so much that I think is unsatisfactory about this building, but it's got, the bones are fine. It just could be rethought through, and I think a lot of the officers' recommendations are about just giving it a better think and come up with a better product. And I think that the officers, the recommendations that they are proposing of change there, possibly they're not against the interests of the developers. I think that they are in the interests of making a better development there. So I'm very supportive of what is proposed to be discussed down the track with our position on this. Thank you very much for the officers coming up with them.
Madam Mayor, do you wish to close? Sorry. Madam Mayor, do you wish to close? No.
No, thank you.
Okay. I'll now put the motion under division and call upon each councillor's vote. Councillor Crawford?
For.
Councillor Gross? For. Councillor Pearl?
In favour.
Councillor Simic? Councillor Simic?
For.
Great. Councillor Voss?
For.
Councillor Baxter?
For.
Councillor Bond?
For.
Councillor Brand?
For.
And Councillor Copsey?
For.
That motion is carried unanimously. Thanks very much. I'll now turn to 6.5, 181 Port, 271 to 281 Ingles Street, Port Melbourne. Are there any questions of the officers in relation to this report? We've heard from the community. from one speaker. Councillor Brand.
Yes, thank you very much. Just want to ask officers about the nature of the master plan 10-year staging and how that plays out with our planning approvals. What exactly would we be approving in the end if, I mean, a normal approval runs out in, 2 years or whatever. 10 years down the track, are we actually approving the architectural finishes and the actual look of it, or are we not expecting the buildings to look anything like what they're presented as now, because in 5, 6, 7, 8 years, they will be probably thinking of doing something different? Just how do we give a permit to a master plan?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'll answer that question. It's George Borg here. So a master plan is essentially, as you've indicated, a plan that identifies a longer term project and will be staged. So what will tend to happen is that we would give an approval for an overall envelope, and then the detail will come later, and they normally will provide us with some opportunity to comment within all those projects. So if you think about the marina which you've recently approved, there'll be proposals within that. They still need to meet certain requirements as part of the approvals process. So it won't be the last we hear of it, and as we've seen with many of the approvals we've provided previously, they often come back with some changes and modifications. So the concept is really what we're approving here today.
Thank you. Okay, I see no further questions. Councillors, we have an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something different? Moved, Councillor Voss. And we have a seconder. I'll second it. So I moved Councillor Voss, seconded Councillor Gross. Rhyming twosome. Councillor Voss, do you wish to say anything?
Yeah, just briefly, this is quite an unusual application, being a master plan. It is located on Ingles Street, right near the bridge. In fact, almost under the bridge, in fact, and it goes right through to Bertie Street. So it's quite a large development. It's a development for that'll be done in a number of stages as requested. Stage 1, the closest one, is for an 18-storey, 324-room hotel residence. And the development is proposed to be done over 10 years. An 18-storey, a 32-storey, 37-storey, and a 50-storey tower. It is in quite a curious location, but I think for this type of building, it is in a good location. I drove past there the other day and actually found I'd never noticed what was there before, and it's a very interesting outdoor barbecue place that people can go to and celebrate after hours or perhaps during the day. It's quite unusual. But having said all that, I'd just like to thank the applicant for coming and submitting to this particular proposal. I'm happy to support it, and hopefully we can see some development there soon, and hopefully it's finished before 10 years. Thank you.
I will say, one of the interesting things about approvals about Fisherman's Bend is just the weird and wonderful different ways they progress, and giving this partial future tick to a master plan is just something we don't do every day. This is going to be a huge development, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But I'm going to vote in favour of it. Are there any other speakers? Madam Mayor, do you wish to close? I will put the motion under division and call upon each councillor's vote. Councillor Gross, in favour. Councillor Pearl.
In favour.
Councillor Simic.
For.
Councillor Voss.
For.
Councillor Baxter.
For.
Councillor Bond.
For.
Councillor Brand.
For.
Councillor Copsey.
For.
Councillor Crawford.
For.
This motion has been carried unanimously. I now want to return back to 6.1. Councillor Pearl might wish to say something about his reasonably trivial conflict.
Thanks very much.
Before you do, I just want to observe that $1 billion worth of developments went through this committee tonight. That's typical of Fisherman's Bend. You know, these are big ideas and big changes, and it is completely different to the rest of the municipality, the way we make decisions, both the quantum of the decisions and the way we make them, because we share that ability with the state. Sorry, I just felt the need to make that observation. So, Councillor Pearl.
Point well made. Jobs and happy new residents along with it. My project was slightly smaller than that. So I, Councillor Marcus Pearl, in relation to item 6.1, have a direct conflict of interest. And as that matter, I will remove myself from the chamber.
Thanks very much. So, councillors, are there any questions of the officers in relation to this report? I can see none. Councillors, we have an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something different? Councillor Crawford is moving. We have a seconder. Councillor Bernadine Voss. Councillor Voss, the Mayor, is seconding this. Would any of you like to speak to the motion? I'll start with Councillor Crawford. I think that's a no. Councillor Voss?
No, thank you.
Is there any other councillor who wishes to speak for or against this motion? I'll move to the vote now and do so under division. Councillor Bond?
For.
Councillor Brand?
For.
Councillor Copsey?
For.
Councillor Crawford?
For.
Councillor Gross? For. Councillor Simic?
For.
Councillor Voss?
For.
Councillor Baxter?
For.
Thanks very much. I declare that motion is carried once again unanimously. Now could Councillor Pearl be invited back in, please? I'll now move to urgent business. Councillors, do you have any items of urgent business? I can see none. Agenda item 9 is confidential matters. Councillors, we have no confidential items. There being no further business, I declare the meeting closed.